welcome everyone to an exciting adventure on riding through the unknown on a special day. And today we have a really cool, different type of show for you all. And I think you all are going to be in for a super awesome treat because today I get to share one of my favorite topics and passions with a guest who's been on several times, but not in this manner. So today, it is my honor and blessing to introduce you all to the spooky paranormal extraordinaire, Olivia James.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. So, what spooky paranormal adventures has Olivia experienced?
I I'm pretty well, so pretty much well, it's for everybody. We were talking about how we wanted to keep it kind of like a fun, casual, spooky show. I mean, just something different. I usually come with the doom and gloom, and we were just like, well, let's just do something a little bit different and just talk about some paranormal experiences that I've had over the years. And it's always fascinated me, and it was something actually that terrified me. This is really strange that it was so scary to me, but now I'm kind of like, I go straight into it, and I let entities take over my body and speak. And it's really interesting that how the difference is from when I was, younger and before I was awake, and how terrified I was. So that's why I think it's so interesting, because how scared I was all the time, and now that I just do it I can do it anytime and not be afraid. So I think it's really interesting. I just thought it was fun that, I've been experiencing stuff since I was a little kid, and I didn't really realize what it was. We always watch all these horror movies, scary movies, so we kind of get like, whoa, like I've seen what happens when, there's a dark that's in the dark, and there's something, a little bit noise in the dark. And that always scared me when I was a little kid, that I would see something in the dark. And I was kind of that kid that, me and my family moved around a lot, and when we would move into new houses, I was that one kid that if I was alone in a room, I would get a tap on the shoulder, and when I would turn around, there's nothing there. And that is always terrifying when you're alone. Look, imagine the 80s, you're alone in your room, you're listening to the radio very quietly, and then something taps you on the shoulder, and you look around, and it's a real distinctive type of feeling. And it felt like a human did it. It felt like a real tap. So I turn around, and there's nothing there but air, but you can feel that energy. I remember when I was young, I would go babysitting, and it seems like every time I would babysit, there would be, I have these kids to watch, but there would always be something kind of like in the air, like almost electricity static. And, animals kind of, I remember seeing like the animals in one of the houses I was babysitting, and it wasn't even that late at night. It was maybe like 8 o'clock. And, the family wasn't set to come home for another hour or so, but the kids came, the little kids, they came running. And, they say that they keep hearing all these noises, and their parents knew about it. And right when the kids were like, "Do you want to come downstairs and see?" And I didn't, but we went when we were going towards. I'm looking at it in my mind. I can remembering I was like 14, and then we're going towards the downstairs, and I remember seeing their family dog. He was in the middle of the kitchen. There was no table in there, and he was doing these. He was staring straight at the basement door where the noises were coming from, the kid said. And the dog stopped, and he didn't move towards the door. And he started like, I'm saying, like, as fast as he can, just doing these circles, like as fast as he can. Like, and the little kids were like terrified, and I was scared. And so we all ran and hid in the bedroom. And, you know, and we were stuck I feel like we were trapped in there, because then it started to be like the Amityville horror, where you could hear just a ton of slamming doors everywhere. Slam, slam, slam. And, I'm just a kid, and they're kids, and none of us are going to go see what it was. We could hear the door slamming. The dog kept barking and barking as loud as he could. And, we waited it out until the family got home. and they just, "Oh, yeah, yeah, we have a little ghost here." And a ghost? I was like, "A ghost?" That was like the Amityville Horror. There were things slamming in the house, the dog was going, I mean, this was scarier than the Amityville Horror. I was like, "Never again." I never went back to that place. I never went and took another babysitting gig there, and I was like, "No way." So it was like, stuff was popping up all the time that I didn't know. And I had a history because I think my mom, she always talked about seeing spirits in the house where we grew up. And, she'd be sleeping and a spirit would come through the curtains and, tell her, "Come here, I've got something to tell you." She always told us about, she saw that. She always kind of was into the paranormal. So was my dad too. He was kind of into the paranormal. I remember when I was a really young kid, and he had just tons and tons of books and all these different kind of things he must have collected from the paranormal, stuff that you don't see anymore, like kind of some kind of like books from like the 1700s, 1800s. It was really interesting that he was kind of into that when he was younger. And there's a lot of so I was going to talk about some of the other things that I saw when I was younger, and a lot of it kind of revolved around seeing myself. And it was like kind of like a part of me that was almost like I was haunting myself. So I would see, always had these kind of like nightmares. They weren't nightmares though, really, because it was a real being. It was myself as a part of my altar that could kind of come. This is weird to say. I mean, we probably should hash this out. Like, how would my altar be able to get out and kind of walk around and kind of like haunt me like its own spirit? I don't think that's something we've talked about before in terms of how altars behave. Because I know the altar now is me, and it was an altar named either it was Ariel or one of the others that kind of is like a survival altar, but they're always the one that looked very scary, like a possessed little girl. And I just think it's interesting that it can behave like a spirit on the outside. It's not trapped within your body. So it was like I always had this shadow following me, this haunting following me, but it was like a piece of me. It was myself that was haunting me. And I always found it terrifying. And I could never get out of that pattern of being scared of this little girl, this possessed little girl. And it was something that was kind of a phobia for me. I used to have a phobia of like The Exorcist, and I didn't know why. Like, why was it so scary to me? And as I became awakened and things like that, I figured out that they kind of used that movie to in kind of like programming for me. Part of that was part of MK Ultra programming for me, because of my connection to like the occult programs and things like that. They wanted me to feel that and be able to embody that. And it was really crazy because in the movie it was so terrifying, the original movie. But I don't know if anybody's ever seen The Exorcist Part 2. And in the movie Part 2, this girl, when she grows up, she figures out that she had been targeted by this particular entity because she was a healer. She was a natural psychic healer. And so that's why she ended up being open to that, to the entity that came after her and wanted to possess her. And that always kind of blew my mind, because it came from the first movie where it was all just attacks, to the second where you found out that it was because some of the entities were looking for these kind of like open vessels or open portals in these children that were kind of like psychic and psychic healers and things like that. So that was kind of interesting, to see that all the time. Have you seen those both?
I have, and it's interesting your point of view of it because I kind of had a different take of the movie, and so that's what's really cool about the paranormal movies is everybody sees it differently. And when you
Hmm.
go back and watch, like if I go and watch it today, I'll be like, oh my god, I do see what she's saying. How did I miss that? And that's the beauty of them. And
Yeah.
what's interesting too is like there's so much in those movies that it's like it's interesting, how each scene it's like, you know, oh, this is happening, and somebody will go, oh my god, that is like so like freaking me out, and somebody else could be sitting right next to him and be like, really? That's the scene that's gonna freak you out in this movie? Not this scene? And they're like, oh, that seems easy. What? And so
I
that's
don't.
the other part of watching those is, watching them with someone and watching what, affects each other differently.
Yeah, and it's really weird for me that part 2 was almost like it was such a huge difference, and I'm like, well, and when I watched it, when I got brave enough to see, like, the whole movie and not be afraid of it anymore, it was like I was like, "What in the" so she was being attacked, because she was psychic, not because, I just thought that was interesting. It kind of like the first one didn't kind of delve into that, but the second one did. So that was always a thing that I thought was scary and I had a phobia of it for a long time. And now I still kind of am a little shaky in it just because of the MK Ultra part, but definitely not nowhere near as to where as I used to be. I do want to talk about this one interesting. So I had this.
Before you do that,
Yeah,
Gina actually has a question for you.
sure.
She said you were protecting yourself. What were you protecting yourself from? Scary for sure.
Well, I didn't at the time, I didn't know. I thought everything before I became awakened, which was about, I want to say around 6 or 7 years ago. Before that, everything to me was a paranormal attack or a paranormal, you know, it was always demons, ghosts, all of it to me was like that because that's kind of how when I was growing up, I pushed everything onto the paranormal. As a child, you're trying to figure out things about your world. And I would have, as a child, I would have never said, oh, that's, MK Ultra. In
Right.
my kid brain, everything was monsters. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. As kids, something that's so scary, people, attribute to monsters and things like that. Because I remember when I think I was about, I don't know, 13 or so. And, that's when Nightmare on Elm Street came out, Freddy Krueger and all that. I stayed up late one night watching it. Not was not supposed to be, but I was downstairs in the living room by myself watching it. And,
Right.
I was just a kid. I fell asleep watching it. And, you know, I heard, in my, you're in that in between of waking and asleep. I kind of heard something coming from the kitchen and I heard a noise, it almost sounded like the window. And, in my kid brain, I'm like, I was 13. I'm like, no way. I'm too scared to even look. I'm not going to look. I'm just going to let it, I'm just going to let it happen because it's probably a monster in my brain. I'm like, this is a monster. So I started hearing this, whatever it was, walking around the house, like where I was on the lower level in the living room and the kitchen area. There was something walking around. I could hear it walk in the kitchen, walk around the bathroom, and then I felt it walk all the way towards me, you know, and I felt it sit down and lean towards me. And it was literally 2 inches from my face, breathing. I could feel its breath, everything. And I was awake at that point. And I was so terrified. I was like almost paralyzed. I couldn't move. But at the same time, I had some type of like survival instinct to play possum. You know what I mean? To not move at all. Something in me was just like, don't move. Don't do anything. I don't know
Right.
how I could even think like that. That kind of surprised me too. Like, how could I even think like that? Looking back on it, like I should have been just like hysterical, as a little kid, but I was like, no, don't move, don't move, don't move. Because in my mind, all I thought it was a demon or a ghost or a monster, some kind of monster. In my kid brain, I was like, this is something I don't even want to look at it, because I could feel it breathing on me. So the thing
Yeah.
kind of walks back to the kitchen. I feel it walk back. It sat right in my face for a really long time, probably like 3 minutes, and then it walked back to the kitchen. So I thought it had left. I'm just a kid. I'm like, oh, it left. It's gone. So I get up and I try to walk upstairs so I can go back up to my bedroom. Like I've had enough of this. And I look over by the refrigerator and the moonlight was coming through, and it was a man in a military outfit. It wasn't a monster. It was a person. And he was dressed in military fatigues. Is that weird or what? And I just started screaming at the top of my lungs, screaming for my parents, like, help, help, help. And they came down and, everybody was all frantic. And they said I was right, that the window was open, the door was left open. So somebody had gotten in and it was a man in a military outfit. So that was kind of a strange incident that I tied to like the paranormal at the time, because I was so afraid of what was going on. And I had no idea. And, my parents didn't, they're just like, oh, just some, thief coming in. I'm like, well, we didn't have anything to steal. He couldn't find anything. And if he was just a thief, why was he, sitting in my face for so long? I could have been murdered, kidnapped, like anything with
Right.
just some a large man in the house. I was just a little kid, so that was a crazy that was a crazy incident of somebody sneaking in. And I did remind my mom, like, I don't know, last year or something. I said, do you remember when that person was in the house and I was scared, and she's like, oh yeah, I remember that. She just thought he was a thief. It was like nothing to her. She's not really scared of that kind of and I'm like, that was terrifying. Can you imagine sleeping as a little kid and there's somebody standing over you when you're trying to sleep? That's like a real nightmare right there. That's a real nightmare.
It is. And one thing that I kind of find interesting is, how our minds portray or think about things. And when you were saying, like, you were standing or sitting there still, not moving, and you're like, fear paralyzed. My thought when I heard that was, "Ooh, look at you standing in your power, not letting them
Yeah.
push you around." And it's interesting how you have the same scenario but two different views, and they're both end up being the same thing.
Yeah, and I thought when I look back at it now, I was like, that was kind of a sign that I wasn't necessarily a normal kid, that I wasn't of something in me was more adult thinking, like saying, "Okay, just lay here, play possum." I literally remember like, "Oh, don't move, don't move. It's right here. It's right here. It's right in your face. Don't move." It's like I don't think a normal kid usually thinks like that. Maybe they do. I don't know. To me, it was a sign for myself that okay, something was a little bit different about me because I should have been, screaming and hollering and everything. And I just was trying to be strategic about it. Wait till the monster leaves and then run upstairs, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And I think all of us as kids have had those days, you watch a scary movie and you're like, holy smokes, I'm not turning this light out in the bedroom. I can't do it today, things like that. And you're arguing with your parents. I don't want the light off. So I
Yeah.
think we have all had those days, but sometimes there's more to it than you even remember. Like now you can think back in your childhood. Maybe that thing in the dark corner, maybe that was something and I just was too scared to even think about it. Maybe I just shut my mind to it. Because that can work. If you want to shut your mind to something, it can, because if you train yourself. Like for me, for my psychic ability, I train myself just for me because I'm not really good with seeing the physical part of entities. So I kind of train myself not to have that. So I block it. Like I don't want to see what they look like physically. I don't mind the hearing and the energy and things like that, but when they come in your if it were to come to my face, like I'm not really a fan of the way they look. So that's something that I try to block for myself if I'm going to be brave. I'm just like, nah, I'd
Yeah.
rather not have that. So it's something that I block. I did want to talk something about this is really interesting. I came upon for a whole year, I was kind of haunted by a ghost mouse, which is really it's a really weird thing to think about. And I remember my children were very young and I was pretty young myself in my 20s. And I moved into this new place with them, and just for like an entire year, every night at the same time, I would wake up, almost like a night terror saying, there's a mouse. And I literally would feel a mouse like on my chest crawling. And it was, a couple of times it went inside my mouth. Like I swallowed it. It went inside my mouth, like in me. I swallowed it. And it went on for a whole year. And even the person that I was dating was so fed up with me with the night terrors about the mice, and I was starting to be like that silly person that I had like, have you ever seen those electronic mouse zappers? I
Oh
had one in
yeah.
every room because of the ghost mouse. Like I thought, I was terrified of it. And I have a fear, like a really extreme severe phobia of mice, which is really ironic and because I didn't know how much it pertained to MK Ultra and how much of the programming and everything had been instilled in me then, you know, so I kept thinking about, all the time these ghost mouse would go like crawl on my chest, be flipping around on my chest, and then one time I swallowed it once. And so I was obsessed at the time. Like I was reading tons of paranormal, all these old paranormal books from like the 1800s, trying to find out if there was any legends about ghost mouse anywhere. And there people over the years, in history and in myths had seen these ghost mice and had experiences with them. And I thought that was really, really crazy to see, because now, when I was first discovering MK Ultra, and to have it be an altar for me, it kind of had, at the beginning, had like that scary connotation, but now that I know, it's more of like there's survival altars, they'll keep me alive. So I'm not so afraid of him anymore. But at the time, this ghost mouse was just terrifying to me. I was reading books. Like I said, I had all the ghost zappers. I mean, I had the mouse zappers around. I had all types of mouse traps, everything. And let me tell you, I never caught anything. I never caught a mouse because I don't think there was like a physical mouse. It was this ghost mouse haunting me. And it just was terrifying. But the zapping of it, of the mouse zapper, kind of helped me sleep too, because it reminds me of like almost like a hypnosis tone. So now I wonder if having all these mouse zappers everywhere zapping at the same time was kind of putting me into like an induction, like a trance induction, in when I go to sleep. So I didn't even know that might have been putting myself into like a really deep trance with the zapping noise, because it does sound like a noise that they use in hypnosis. Like it's that constant zap, zap. And that reminds me of, we were talking earlier about The Exorcist 2. In that movie, they had Reagan, the girl, her, and she was with another person. They were using strobe lights for hypnosis to try to get and see what she knew. And they were pumping that hypnosis strobe, and it had like this really hypnotic tone with it too. So that's another interesting thing that they put in there. They tied it into like almost like a trance, the trance, to see if she could see anything. And she always saw stuff because she was psychic herself. So that was really cool, I thought. So this ghost mouse, it just somehow just went away after about a year. It went away. And during that time, I had a lot of different paranormal experiences. My kids were having paranormal experiences, they were always, hearing things or seeing things. And they weren't so much as scared as I was, which was really weird. And I never let them watch anything scary. So they didn't have that same fear. They didn't know a ton about like horror movies or anything. So for them, it was just like a really little kid fear. Like, oh, we heard a noise. We thought we heard a noise, and there would be things like you would be sleeping in the room, and in the middle of the night, like a bunch of books would be thrown at your door, or, you would hear like, just doors opening and closing, windows, kind of like jingle, kind of like shaking, you know. I I had one time where, and I'd have those classic hauntings where I would be sleeping and all of a sudden the TV would turn on static, like at a level like a million, as loud as it could be at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, oh no, not the witching hour, anything but that. Why couldn't it be, 11:35 or something? No, it's always was at like after 3 o'clock. And I'm like, I was like, I'm not getting up. And I was terrified to get up. It took me about 20 minutes to get up and turn the TV off because I was so scared. I was like, dang it, I don't want to do this. I would have stuff like that when I would have, like, if I was having a really bad nightmare, like night terror or something. I remember I was afraid to even turn on the lights anymore, because I would go, if I had a really bad night terror, all that energy was so pent up inside me. It was all this psychic, kind of like pent up energy. And I turn on the light switch and it would just explode all over my head. And it would be so scary. And I would just run back to my room. So didn't even want to get up and turn on the lights, because I didn't know how much psychic energy was kind of like trapped inside me. And what's really interesting is psychic energy kind of increases when someone is pregnant. And
Oh yeah.
I don't know why. Like, I remember when I was pregnant with my last child, that all the psychic um psychic energy increased and the paranormal increased around me. Like I was seeing and hearing things every day, things would be moved around the house every day, things would be thrown around every day, you know, large pieces of furniture were moving like in a basement. I mean, things that couldn't move on their own, like a weight set, the whole thing was moving. You could even see the tracks where it had moved. Like nobody was down there. It moved on its own. I don't know how that could even move. Like it was so heavy. I have no idea. I mean, maybe somebody could say there was an earthquake or something. I don't know. We don't have earthquakes in our area, but that, I want to be kind of like realistic. Maybe something did move it. I don't know. I had just had so many nightmares. Anytime I would go in the basement, that was definitely a hot spot. The basement for us was a hot spot. And I would have nightmares all the time about basements, something to do with basements. Even now, I still have nightmares about basements. And I'm trying to, I've done a lot of thinking and soul searching about it. And I think it has to do with like the darkness and just that going down, 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 down. It's almost reminds me of kind of like a hypnotic induction too, when I'm even going down the stairs, like down, down, down. As soon as I go down there, there's like, that's where I do all my laundry and everything. And I definitely 100% heard the Trinity knock. No one was home. It was daytime, totally Amityville horror type stuff. I'm down there doing laundry. It's dark. It's kind of dark. I only have one little light bulb down there. And literally I could feel like you can almost start to feel like a pressure kind of like on around by your shoulders, like almost like a tingly type of pressure. And I was starting to feel that. And right by it didn't even feel like it came from a wall almost. It was almost like an invisible wall next to me. And they knocked 3 times. And I froze. I dropped everything. Like I didn't even finish. I dropped it immediately and just ran. I ran. That's something that kind of like scared me because I used to watch a lot of scary movies, and that Trinity knock was something that was like terrifying. I don't know if anybody knows what the Trinity knock is, but sometimes they'll have like a spirit that'll knock 3 times, and it kind of like it always scares me just because of what it's supposed to mean, and back in those days I was scared of everything. So that was something that was always scary. So like I said, when I was pregnant, it was just everything. It was like just like being in one of those houses when I was babysitting, like just, things moving everywhere, things shifting, things being lost. And then, you find them again in a different place, and those are during those times too. I was still getting taken and used for certain missions and things like that I didn't even know what was happening. I was having a lot of not really gang stalking, but I would always hear like it almost sounded like somebody was walking the perimeter around my house, like just walking. You could hear some walking in the grass around. And I had really good hearing. And it was just like I could always hear somebody walking in the grass. But when you look out there was nothing out there. And, I could always, just rationalize it by saying it's an animal every single night, probably just an animal walking around. Or, there's so many different ways you can rationalize all this scary stuff that happens, and it's just sometimes there's just no way to explain things. I don't know if anybody's ever played with the Ouija boards, but I had I don't know if I want to call it cool, but those definitely are 100% real. I know people say that it's just somebody moving the thing and, it doesn't work. And I can guarantee 100% it works. It just depends on the person. I think it depends on the person using it or the person in the room. I'm not quite sure because I wasn't using it. So I was just a kid, a dumb kid, about 17, I think it was about 16 or 17. And I had a couple of girlfriends over and, they invited some little boys from the neighborhood, some other teenage boys. And, we're being teenagers and they're, let's do something fun and let's scary. And they said they wanted to play with the Ouija board and they had done it before. And I was like, no way. I definitely watched The Exorcist and what happened to people when they used the Ouija board. I said, I don't want anything to do with it. But I did help them. I built it out of like we had some old game that we had thrown out. We had the cardboard still. So I made that into a Ouija board for them and just used like a little plastic cap as the planchette. Who would have thought that would like create some like mega psychic portal? I had no idea that could do that. So I They were playing with it. I didn't want nothing to do with it. I kind of sat like way back in the corner on a couch, like just watching from afar because I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. So these boys, they're trying to scare everybody. They're being kids. They're trying to scare, let's call this, demon and let's do this. And so they're talking to these, entities, the two boys, and the girl is sitting there next to her. And I'm way back in the couch. And I could hear like a big, like, like this, they all inhale kind of, and
Right.
see the cap that they were using, it stopped in the middle of the board and it started to crawl on the floor. I'm talking on the floor, on the carpet. I'm getting chills just talking about it because I can remember it. It was crawling on the floor, on the carpet with nothing behind it. I'm just saying, this plastic cap just moving on its own, and it was coming towards me on the floor like pretty quickly, and it stopped right in front of me, and I just was like frozen, and everybody's like, it wants to talk to you. It wants to talk to you now. It's going to talk to you. And, I'm just, they kind of pressured me. They're like, just come one time, one time. And so I did. And that was like a really like interesting moment when I touched it. Is just the electricity shot through my arms almost. It was almost like these things that they had called knew what I could do. They knew that something was different about me. So they took that thing and like kind of said, come here, we need to talk to you, kind of thing. So, I mean, I didn't take my hands off it I swear it was probably 3 hours. And I just kept, and other people were asking it questions, and I was just kind of like the vessel for it, just like I do now. Like I could become a vessel. I was doing it at like a really young age, a teenager, letting them all ask questions and, say, whatever they wanted to say. And it just went on for a really long time. I remember all these different relatives that had passed had come through, and I think I told my family about it, and one of them wanted to try it, and then they did, and they were terrified because it created like a real portal where this a real, almost like an electric burst came right out of the carpet, and it floated in the air. And we threw it away. We never used that thing again because I ended up creating a portal with it. I didn't even know that that could be done. I didn't know anything about what I could do. And after that happened at the apartment we were living at, it was just nothing but paranormal activity after that. I think whatever had been called through the Ouija board, it was a way to let it in. And it was kind of, I think it was an angry, almost more like an angry spirit. It didn't really remind me of an entity because a lot of entities, they don't have a lot of time to do little pranks and things. Like we would come home and the bathroom would be destroyed. Like it looks like somebody went in the bathroom and threw everything that was in there, shampoos, everything, and just threw them all in the toilet for no reason. That's just all in there. And then, you have to clean it out and everything. And then, your bedroom door was never, the ghost or whatever it was didn't want you to keep your bedroom door closed. It would constantly like fly open. Every time you closed it, it would just come open. So you just end up leaving it open. You could even test yourself. Like you could even like, okay, I'm going to leave all my doors closed, like seriously closed, no, nothing, to see if it would open. And when you would get back home, they were all open. Everything was open. Everything would be opened. And so I ended up leaving that place because I didn't think the ghost there was it was getting a little too aggressive. So those hauntings like that do kind of happen. Can be a few aggressive ghosts. I've met them, and somehow they can get like, I don't know. I haven't experienced one hitting me, but I know other people have, and then they felt it because like that energy push, they can push it out, if they want
Right.
it, can build up that much energy. I've seen it. I've had a child that experienced it. They said that was a monster and that it hit them. And, I believed them. I was like, yeah, I bet it probably was a ghost that was angry and they saw something. They are my kids, so maybe they have a little bit of this, psychic energy themselves, and, seeing things themselves and not knowing, what it is really. And they grew up kind of like not scared of it. So maybe in a way they were able to handle it a little bit better than me because, I grew up kind of scared of it. So it was always this so that was a really scary time, that Ouija board. Have you ever seen one or used one yourself?
I've seen them, and I've been around them when people were using them, but I never personally like engaged it like, oh yeah, let's do this or that and talk with it. But I still feel like though, because I was in the vicinity of it, yeah, my energy got put into it, and so
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, thanks guys. I really wasn't wanting to be attached to this thing, but now I am. Thanks.
You know,
But
that's a good point because we didn't like when we're younger, we didn't know that just being in the room does something. You know, I didn't even touch it, and it came to me and like kind of like pressured me into speaking with it. I didn't even touch the Ouija board. I was just in the room. That's
yeah,
it. That's a horror movie right there. Like you're just in the room and the ghosts come and they want to speak to you. And not all of them are scary. I don't want people to think that, all spirits are aggressive and scary. I don't usually have that experience where I'm afraid of them anymore. I don't even if they look scary and something happened to them, or it's not the same as when I was younger. When I was younger, I just felt like everything was scary no matter what. Even entities, I'm not really scared of them. They could talk to me, say their names and stuff. I'm not scared of them at all. It doesn't terrify me. I don't think people need to even be afraid of it, in my opinion, because, I've let them inside my body to talk and I nothing happened. I'm not afraid of it, nothing really even happened. And obviously I'm not telling people to try that, but I'm just saying, the fears we have, there may be a lot of factors involved into figuring out what we're afraid of.
very true. And I have an interesting question, and I'm trying not to steer it in a direction and staying in the paranormal,
Go ahead.
but I'm kind of, you having these experiences, I had these experiences. I'm kind of wondering if the paranormal was like our mind's way of coping and preparing us for what we were going to discover about ourselves. And so that's why our experiences are somewhat different and, has a different kind of result in our later lives.
I
Does
think
that
it could
kind of
be a
make
lot.
sense?
Yeah, I think something like that had to do because of my altar. When I created one of my altars, the survival altar, it came from a child fear of like horror movies almost. I created it in my own body, what could I make that would scare somebody else to leave me alone? And it was this little possessed girl, this image of this little possessed girl that I created to scare other people away from me. You know what I mean? She's that terrifying. She's that strong. She's that, she has that enormous, psychic energy of like that she can put fear in other people. A little tiny girl, So I think it has that. I think you might be onto something that, part of it is, and especially if you're, because I don't, not all, people that were in the program say they've experienced psychic or like paranormal. Not everybody, goes down that road. They might have a different experience, but I think some of us kind of get kind of like pulled into that based on, what they wanted you for, what they used you for, what happened in your particular experience of MK Ultra. Like that happened to me as a child, so it continued as into adulthood. Not everybody had that, mashup or whatever you want to call it, you know.
Right. And the other thing that I found interesting is, so you talk about the ghost mouse
Mhm.
and your alter name that you use a lot is the gray mouse.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that I had an experience where I was on a camping trip for one of my birthdays in high school, and I'm on the side of a mountain by myself. Well, I call it a mountain, it's more like a hill, being where I live. And all of a suddenly I see these little wolves, and I see like a mom wolf, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And I have an affinity to the wolf. And I walk up, and as I'm approaching, I see the mom noticing me, and she's kind of giving me the look like, it's okay, you can approach. And I'm walking, and all of a sudden, this black alpha appears and charges me. and I see him jump, and it's like I see him jump at me, but the thing is, I never saw him go through me. It's like he stopped somewhere inside of me, and like we meshed, and it's like I was like, okay, I think I just become one with my what I called totem animal growing up, being paranormal. And one of my alters is a werewolf. And so I kind of wonder, in looking now through today's eyes, going, is this a way our alter introduced themselves to us, was through this paranormal experience because the mind would understand it?
I got in my personal belief, I feel like we had more to do with how the altars, formed and were created more than programmers did. That's my personal belief because I've seen what they can do and they're dedicated to me. They're not dedicated to handlers, in my opinion. My
Right.
altars are for me. So I think we, in our minds and our bodies and everything, had more of a hand in creating these beings than they did. Because, we give these handlers too much credit, and saying that, they created altars or the altars they created are going to kill us and things like that. I haven't experienced that. So I just feel like we have more control over them than they do and always have probably because they are us. They're something that's we have created for us to survive.
Yeah.
And
I just thought
and
it was
it's through myth
interesting.
too. The
Yeah.
wolf is a very long-standing myth of a lot of different cultures of that spirit. And so like I didn't know mice were either. I had to read a lot to see that other people had experienced that too, where they saw this, mouse. And, some people think that seeing that mouse spirit is like you can see things that other beings can't because it's such a small little thing and it hides and it's able to see things and get in and out of places. It has that energy of like getting in and out and being very sneaky and just and it kind of reminded me, just being a little tiny person and, getting in and out of these places, that the
Yeah.
mouse can get into. So, there was so many different things that happened and they were all interesting and there's so much,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm writing a book about just like paranormal experiences and things. I have that in the works just because I think it's so cool, you know.
It
And
is.
what
And it was just interesting to me, the parallels of, you imagining it went in your mouth and you like swallowed it. I
Yeah,
had it enter my body,
yeah.
through pushing through, but it stayed in my body. So that's what I'm like. It's interesting that we both envisioned it becoming one with us because it entered us.
Yeah, it's like I can't believe and I swear when it went inside my mouth, I felt it. I felt the gulp. I felt it. Like I really felt it. Like I felt the gulp. I always felt it on my chest. Like I would clutch at my chest when I was having a night terror about the mice. Like I would clutch my chest because I thought I could grab it in because it was literally, going back and forth, like almost like swirling and going crazy on my chest. And I try to grab it, and I remember I had some psychic told me once that, oh, it could have been your spirit trying to get back in your body. And I'm like, well, it could have been anything at that point because I didn't even know then that I could do astral travel or bilocate or anything. I didn't know I could do it then. I don't know
Right.
what I was doing then. I did want to talk about this is really interesting that, and some of these, if anybody's ever looked at like some of these old like witchcraft or they have like the keys of Solomon kind of things, they have these drawings sometimes of like some of these entities and some of them look like they're part animals. Like they'll have like three different, faces or animals. And I know before I was awakened, something had switched in me where it was on like, I went from like 0 to 10 in terms of like psychic abilities overnight for, I don't know why. And I remember during that time, a lot of these entities would come in the form of animals. And throughout myth in different cultures that they say the same thing that there's a lot of different entities, or what they might have called demonic. I don't really call them demons or anything like that, because I don't feel like that word really makes sense for what I've experienced with them. So they would come into, I know one of them came as, this was a wolf one time, and I thought that was really strange. And then one came as a spider, a giant spider in the corner of my bedroom. And I remember one was trying to come in. I had slept, I slept on the second story. So I had my window open. It was in the summer. And I was sleeping, and there was a bat trying to get in. And it was like trying to get in with its teeth, like in the window. And I couldn't tell if it was a nightmare or if it was real. But then the thing spoke to me in my head. And then I knew it was something trying to get in, like not just get in a window, but get in, get in, enter, enter your space or whatever. And, I was
Right.
terrified. That was before I knew what I could do. And I was terrified of anytime it came as an animal. And I was like, why is it doing, why is it coming as an animal? So I figured out that they pick different forms that they think that you might be okay with or be comfortable with, or less threatening, whatever they can, whatever different ways they do it. And there was a time when I was laying on, I was just in my room, I was sleeping, and I was almost like, if you know that, sleeping but not sleeping, almost like in the middle.
The
And
Twilight.
I hear this really loud roar, like almost like it sounded so loud in my ears. It was like a helicopter was in my room, and I could hear it in my ears, and it was so loud. And when I opened my eyes, I looked up, and I swear to God, there was a giant black bird, like as big as my ceiling, flapping its wings over top of me, flapping and flapping and flapping, a giant one. And I just went, I couldn't move or anything. And it went inside me. Just like you said, that thing went inside you. That thing went inside me that day. And I don't remember a lot after that. Like, I don't know if I had allowed it in and it just kind of walked around for a while and trying to check out Earth, and I don't remember when it left, or what happened. Really, I kind of went, it's like a little bit, I don't know if I blocked it out, or I can't even remember, kind of thing. But it's interesting that we're letting things inside our bodies in a way, but then these things, to have that same ability, it's really hard because it's right on the edge of, like, are we asking for it or not, or if it's just pushing it onto us. So that was a really interesting time when I had that entrance by that giant, I don't know if it was a raven, it was just a giant black bird. And I think it was kind of like a being that took that form, that wanted to enter, and took that form
Yeah.
to enter. And they use that kind of connection to try to use that, to try to enter me. And just, they wanted to just kind of come and walk around and check things out, which I would allow it at certain times, but I'd like to be asked. Like, I don't remember allowing it, but I probably did in some way, because at that time I was so, kind of working on learning all about my psychic ability. And I was constantly putting myself in trances, just constantly by myself, just doing it. I was kind of like a self-practice type person. So I was doing a lot by myself. So in a way, that was kind of like giving that kind of entrance, point for
Yeah.
them. And they were coming a lot in dreams. I was getting a lot of, like, in dreams. And and there was one that was kind of like taking the vampire approach, which I thought was really interesting. It would come into your dream, and it would take, every night it would take the form of a different, like, kind of like male movie star, and it was trying to, like, tempt me that way. Like, it would come in a dream, and, like, it would try to create this, like, romantic scenario. And I knew it wasn't, I knew it was like a trick, because at the end, like, there was one day when it had created this romantic scenario where it was doing, like, almost like a fancy, like, dance, like on a dance floor, and there was, like, it made me smell flowers in the air, like roses and stuff. And then at the end of the dance, the music stopped, and it said, "Now let me in." So I was like, "Oh, this is nice try. Now let me in." Like, so if you ever hear those three words, they're trying to ask for your permission to enter. And
Right.
I was just like, "No, thank you. No, thank you." But At least you asked. At least you asked
Yeah,
politely. So that's interesting how how many different forms they take. And I know we see this stuff on TV and we laugh at it, but it is real. They do that. It is real. And
it is.
I wasn't afraid. It was just like they're taking the form of like, I don't know, whatever movie star, handsome male movie star. Like I'm not afraid of like whoever, Brad Pitt or whatever. I'm not afraid of that. So stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, this is silly. Like I was so embarrassed for them. I'm like, why would you take like, nice try, like saying, let me in, after this huge romantic thing. And I'm like, oh goodness. So that stuff does happen. That kind of reminds me of a vampire approach. So I kind of call it the vampire approach when they come to your
Right.
dreams. It's an
No.
attractive
Yeah.
person and they create all these little scenarios in your mind, and at the end of it, they'll now let me into your life, so that's kind of something to watch for, because to me that's a little bit coercive, and I'm not really into that.
It is, and talking about like paranormal like experiences in movies and stuff, it's kind of funny,
Hmm.
when you mentioned like the spider. It's like it flashed to me every time I watched the movie Cole. I think it's Cole the Conqueror or just
Hmm.
Cole. When he's in that cave and that giant white spider, I only know it's a white spider because I see it and at that point like start to appear, and it's like I had to close my eyes or look away. It's like I cannot stand looking at that spider.
Yeah,
But
sometimes
I
it's
can
one of
see
them.
the yeah, but with seeing the wolf in Neverending Story never phased me. I'm like, hey, yeah, But I'd also have in the back of my mind like, why do people always picking on the wolves? Why are wolves always portrayed
It's
like
so
they're
scary.
gonna kill you? Because wolves are not that violent actually, unless you provoke them.
It's just weird how like I was more afraid of a ghost mouse than these like beings that were trying to get in the window, tearing through the screen like a vampire.
Yeah,
Like, how can I be more afraid of a ghost? But that's has to do with our personal experience of what happened to us. All of it is different. So it was really interesting to have that. There's so many different stories. I'm gonna pack my book full of them because I
yeah.
think it's so interesting. All the different conversations I had with different beings and things, and what they kind of said, and kind of like what they felt like. And they felt like very heavy. Like it makes your arms feel very heavy when they kind of try to enter your body and walk around. You walk different. You really do. If you've allowed something to use your body for a short time, you walk different. I remember one time it happened to me at work. And because of me, because I was in the early phases of trying to figure out what my abilities were, I was constantly in that psychic mind frame. I was always having myself on the verge of a trance, almost like light trance all the time. And I remember I had it happen at work where I let something, use my body. And when I stood up to walk, I could tell I was walking different. I knew it. I couldn't even walk correctly because it was like the feet were doing, somebody else was walking. So it was hard to figure out how to walk. And I remember I was trying to go to the refrigerator at my work to get something. And like, even when I grabbed the refrigerator door handle to open, I felt like I grabbed it awkwardly, like I didn't really know. And I kind of I couldn't remember what I brought to work to drink. And I was looking through all the different sodas. I'm like, is that mine? Is that my, the thing that I let use me? It was like he didn't know, or it didn't know what drink was mine. It was really interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are several times like, and maybe this is part of it when you're like, I'm hungry, so you go and you open the refrigerator door, and you're like, why am I opening the refrigerator door?
Like you even slipped time for like a few seconds. That's how I felt too. Like I slipped time. It was really strange.
I've never equated it to like something being in me using my body. It's like I just figured, man, I must be getting up there in age now where I can't remember it
Yeah, I
goes
can
from
usually
one room to
tell.
another. Why did I go in here?
It always looks like somebody's like it always feels like somebody is looking through my eyes. Like I can feel like almost like somebody like sitting right behind my eyeballs, like just sitting there, like another being just sitting there behind my eyes, kind of like looking around. I thought that was weird. That's imagine opening somebody up and there's like a set of eyeballs in back of their eyeballs. That would be trippy.
Yeah, so, with the little bit of time we have left, I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious, being paranormal related. Is there any locations that you've heard of and you're like, oh, I definitely want to go there, or no way do I want to step foot in there with what I know and what I'm capable of?
I would love to. I would just be so interested to see. I think it would probably, I see there's a lot of paranormal investigators that go into these hauntings and, they hear a noise and they're terrified. I mean, you have no idea. I let demons talk through me. Like if you want to see something interesting, that's very interesting, One noise is nothing. I thought that too when I was young. I thought one noise in the room, I'm gonna run away and be terrified. But now it's just like, I would love to see like their reaction if they heard it firsthand of me doing that. Letting something speak and it start to argue with you or something. I had one that because I did have an entity that somebody was talking to when it was inside me, and it started to kind of like hit on her and like try to like I thought I was like, oh, because in the inside I was in a trance. I'm like, this is so embarrassing because I didn't stop the thing from like trying to hit on her, and it was like trying to talk really sweet to her. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so embarrassed. Like I could hear myself saying that in the inside, like, oh, I'm embarrassed about this, but I couldn't stop it.
No, I think it'd be fun to
I
take
think
you
I
on
always
an
find it fun.
investigation.
Yeah, just let me go into like a little short trance and see what happens.
I'm laughing because I'm picturing you like going into trance and an altar coming up, and it's like me being me. It's like my altar comes up, and it's like our altars start duking it out or something.
Yeah,
And everyone's
they start
like,
arguing.
"What just happened?"
And it only, it's not really when I do it, it's not really like in the movies. I haven't, kind of gone in the air or elevated or what do you call that? I
Oh, the
haven't gone in the
levitating.
yeah, I haven't levitated or anything like that. There's been a couple times, obviously I say crazy shit, but oh, I'm sorry. Say crazy stuff, but there's been one time where I did like this. I did do like the classic like laugh, and it went on for a really long time. It was like 2 minutes. It was like the thing whatever was talking through me. I think it was something called Agramon. And it was just did that really like belly laugh for straight 2 minutes. It didn't stop. And I was like, "Oh, I could feel myself in the inside like saying, this is embarrassing too because this is like a classic thing that you see in the movies when they do the laugh, that really evil laugh. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. We have an interesting question come in, and I think it's going to be interesting your answer because of what you can do. Tamoya is asking, "Hey, is it possible to be in sense of yourself when a person is possessed state?"
Yeah, I always am because I allow it and it's not forced on me. That's another thing too. I allow it. I say, yes, you can use my body to speak or do whatever, I allow it. It's a different scenario because I'm basically consenting to the experience and I let them speak through me. And then I push because I'm connected to whatever the highest possible aspect of myself is to do this. And it feels so strong. I feel so strong. That's why I'm not afraid of it. And when I'm letting them I can feel myself like getting either embarrassed or like, oh man, I wish they didn't say that or do that. So I can definitely feel I'm still aware. And sometimes it's kind of embarrassing. Or I can pop through and say, hey, I think we need to cut this guy off. He's being a little too extra or whatever the entity is doing. And I can say, or I can ask for more, let's delve more. I can speak even through that. And sometimes the voices sound really different. Sometimes they sound similar. It's all different experiences.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, and I know we're at the hour, but I just want to ask your opinion on something real quick, if I
Mhm.
may.
Yeah, sure.
What's the difference do you feel between being possessed, where something takes your body and uses it from you, versus like channeling and all of that, or do you feel like there's not a difference?
There's a difference. I know that there's a definite difference because, you can do all those, but are people channeling, allowing the being to become them and not just speak through them? Like when I do it, I go into the deepest trance I can go. So I'm like laying down and the thing like takes over. I'm like laying down on my back, eyes closed, everything. Sometimes I can get to where if I let it come in, but like nobody else is around, I can just let it walk around. It might like I said, it was trying to go in the fridge and look for something and it didn't know what to look for, something like that. That's not necessarily channeling. I'm not, channeling everything. I'm just letting it walk around for a little bit. And sometimes that's all they want to do is just come and walk around for a little bit. And, I've never had it, you know, hurt me, or I've never hurt anybody during that. They just wanted to see what kind of soda was in the fridge, that kind of thing. It wasn't that big of a deal. I know it sounds crazy that they were looking at the different sodas, but, that was something that happened. I think I think a lot of our myths and, have shaped a lot of our belief systems in a way about certain experiences. And I really had to experience it for myself, to not be afraid of it, and to kind of feel like it was like a valid thing in the world. Like it's something in the world that's probably been around for since the beginning. And maybe
Yeah,
because it's unseen, is kind of the unknown, and it causes that fear in us. And it did to me too.
you must not have any allergies, because if I did, I would be petrified of letting something use me, because it could go in right into what I'm allergic to, and it's like, uh-oh.
I know. Yeah, I would have been felt weird if it chose something that to drink that I didn't usually drink. Then I'd be like, why am I drinking this? Like something that I would never drink, like a diet soda or like a tea or something. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, be like, I'm allergic to ice cream. Hey, let's go get a tub of ice cream and let's just pack that thing in.
And they do like to eat when they
Well,
enter the body. They come to the earth state. They like to eat. That's like one of the main things they want to do, which I think is weird. They want to experience like food and drinking, and they don't always do it in
healthy
a
way.
civilized manner. They kind of like attack the food. Like if you've ever seen some like "Arr, arr, arr," like go crazy on food. It's like
Oh, I could totally see you on one of those candid restaurant.
yeah, like
No.
doing like they might do like a mukbang or something. It's really interesting that they want to enjoy food. That's one of the things, because we think they come straight in looking for havoc and destroy, destroy, and they're like food. That's one of the first things they think of, food.
It's funny you say that, because there's an anime out. Dragon Ball Super was the
Mhm.
one that I'm referencing, where they had the god of destruction coming to destroy the earth. And the only thing that saved the earth was they gave him a buffet of food, and he loved the food. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to spare this world.
Yeah, isn't that weird that that's what the first thing they wanna do is have food? They look for food.
Oh. Well, thank you for sharing this paranormal hour with us.
Yeah,
And
thank you. It was fun.
yeah, it was fun, and we should do it more often.
Yeah, these are fun talks.
So, with that being said, do follow Olivia. And do you want to promote your other books
Yeah,
or
I just have my
anything
2
you got
books
coming?
still. Yeah, I still have all my information. My blog's free. You can go and check out my blog on Substack. I post there pretty regularly, different writings. I have 2 books, Gray Mouse, Sex, Space, and Mind Control, and Gray Mouse Purgatory, if you're into reading more. Then I also took a lot of the book. I took a lot of passages and things like that, and I made them into videos on YouTube on Gray Mouse Chronicles. So you can check that out too. If you're not necessarily a reader, there's different formats that you can get the information. So everybody has access to the information.
Very cool. And my mod team put up the earlier in the show when we just started the Gray Mouse Chronicles YouTube channel link, so I was putting it back up. And I believe this is one of your Amazon links too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, to one of the books.
So there you go, folks. And do hang around, well, you don't have to hang around here on show, but do hang around, because you never know when Olivia may be popping up again and having either another paranormal episode, or she may be sharing some insights into another part of the world. But no matter what information is coming through, always remember there's hope, so it's not all doom and gloom. Always be able to find the light in everything because it's there. You just got to look for it. Anything you want to add, Olivia, before we say goodbye
Just
for now?
I just want to piggyback off what you said, and I had an angel tell me once that I was a shadow student and that yes, it was okay for me to work the shadows, but then they said, but always live in the light.
Yes. And here's an interesting thing for you, Olivia. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but when we talk about like shadows and shadow work and shadow beings, we always think in our minds, oh, here's this dark or
Hmm.
gloomy work that we have to do. But I was looking one day with this year and had this epiphany of, we don't see the shadow unless there's light because it's in the dark. So therefore, the shadow has to have light in it.
Yeah, I I feel like they're one and the same almost, like different sides of it.
Yeah, because I mean, we always say, "Oh, look, I can see your shadow." Well, how do you see my shadow in the dark unless there's light somewhere? So that's where that epiphany came from of, wow, the shadow is not this dark thing.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's been times where I sat outside in the dark and what am I afraid of? It looks beautiful. The dark was beautiful. There's a few stars in the sky. Like, why am I afraid of that? It's so interesting that things change.
It is, and it's always like a instant. You'll go to sleep one day afraid of the dark, and then you wake up the next day, go through the day, and when it comes to night, you're like, hey, I want to go outside in the dark.
And it's beautiful out there. It's
Yeah,
nice and quiet and pretty. There's a few stars, you can hear the animals. It's different from when I was younger, definitely.
it is. Well, thank you for coming on and
Yeah, thank
sharing this
you.
side of you with us. And I do have to say, I really enjoyed this, and I look forward to more of these
Yeah,
episodes.
me too. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yes. Well, everyone, have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy your week. Blessings to you all, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.